He lit up the stage with fire in his feet and thunder in his voice. He could make a nation dance. A man who turned pain into rhythm, survival into performance, and rage into soul. His screams weren't just melodies, they were a cry from the depths of a broken world. But what if the man who gave us joy was drowning in silence behind the curtain? James Brown was known as the Godfather of Soul, but beneath that dazzling crown was a life pierced by abandonment, addiction, and endless war against others and against himself. His fall didn't happen in front of a roaring crowd or under a spotlight. It happened slowly, in courtrooms, prison cells, hospital beds, and the haunted corners of his own mind. From the sweat-soaked stages of Harlem to a quiet hospital room in Atlanta, the journey of James Brown was never just music. It was rebellion, it was redemption, and in the end, it was ruin. This isn't the story of a superstar. This is the reckoning of a man who screamed, "I feel good," while bleeding on the inside. This is the untold story of James Brown.
James Joseph Brown was born on May 3, 1933, in Barnwell, South Carolina, a forgotten corner of America where poverty wasn't just a circumstance, it was a way of life. He didn't arrive in the world with comfort or joy, but with a cry that pierced through hunger, abandonment, and despair. His mother left him while he was still a child, and he was raised by his father, a turpentine worker, in shacks with no electricity, no plumbing, and for much of his childhood, no real sense of home. Brown grew up surrounded by the sounds of hardship, the rustling wind through rotting wood, the sharp bark of arguments behind thin walls, and the rhythmic hymns from the church where people sang not for praise, but for survival. Even as a child, James felt the weight of being unwanted, not just by his parents, but by the world. He polished shoes on street corners, danced for coins, and by his teenage years was stealing to stay alive. He was arrested for stealing a car and sent to a juvenile detention facility, a prison in every sense but name. But it was there, in the gray silence of confinement, that James Brown found his first lifeline: music. Inside those walls, he met Bobby Bird, a fellow inmate who would become a lifelong collaborator and one of the few who truly understood him. Together, they found rhythm in the clank of metal, melody in the aching silence. James began singing, drumming, performing, not for an audience, but to prove that something inside him was still alive. He had no formal education, he couldn't read music, but he could read pain. And pain became his language. By the time he walked out of that detention center, James Brown wasn't just a free man, he was a storm waiting to be heard. His dream wasn't to be famous, it was to never be ignored again.
When James Brown walked out of that juvenile detention center, he didn't have a dollar to his name. But he had something far more dangerous, an unshakable fire in his soul. That fire would burn its way into every room he entered, every stage he touched, and every mind he electrified. He wasn't looking for fame, he was demanding it. With Bobby Bird by his side, Brown joined a local gospel group called the Gospel Starlighters. But soon, gospel wasn't enough. The stage needed to shake, the crowd needed to scream, and so the group evolved into the Famous Flames. Brown, with his explosive energy and guttural screams, became its epicenter, and in 1956, they released a track that would rip through the American consciousness, "Please, Please, Please." The song wasn't polished, it wasn't clean, but it was raw, desperate, and honest. Brown didn't sing the lyrics, he bled them, and America listened. The single sold over 1 million copies. Suddenly, the poor kid from a broken shack in South Carolina had arrived. But James Brown wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want to be heard, he wanted to control everything. The sound, the rhythm, the moves, the business. He learned to lead his band just with a glance, a gesture, a stomp. Musicians feared him, admired him, worshipped him. Because on stage, he was a general, a preacher, a god. Then came the hits, one after another. Try Me, Night Train, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, I Got You, I Feel Good. And with each one, he wasn't just topping charts, he was reshaping the entire music industry. But it wasn't just the music, it was the movement. In the 1960s, when America was erupting in racial tension, James Brown took the microphone and screamed power into the silence. Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud wasn't just a hit song, it was a revolution set to a funk beat. For millions of Black Americans, Brown was more than an entertainer. He was a warrior in sequins. He bought radio stations. He spoke at schools. He calmed riots with a concert. He told Black kids to stay in school, to believe in themselves, to own their voices. He was the embodiment of Black pride, flawed, fiery, unstoppable. By the early 1970s, James Brown was one of the most influential figures in American culture. His net worth soared. He dressed in furs and capes, performed with military precision, and demanded absolute perfection. But what no one saw, or what many chose to ignore, was the price he was beginning to pay. Behind the sunglasses, behind the sweat, behind the thunderous applause, the man was beginning to crack.
James Brown had once stood as the symbol of control over his music, his message, his destiny. But as the years wore on, the man who once commanded every note began losing grip on everything else. Behind the scenes, his empire was freeing. Band members left, many complaining of unpaid wages and Brown's tyrannical perfectionism. Longtime collaborators drifted away, exhausted by the tension, the fear, the unrelenting demands of a man who trusted no one, not even himself. And then came the drugs. Brown had always lived on the edge, manic, obsessive, electric. But in the 1980s, he crossed a line. Cocaine, often mixed with PCP, became his escape and his weapon. He became paranoid, unpredictable, violent. The Godfather of Soul, once a master of rhythm and command, began spiraling into chaos. His third marriage to Adrienne Rodriguez became a battlefield. She accused him of domestic abuse, not once, but repeatedly. Their relationship swung wildly between public reconciliation and private brutality. At times, she wore sunglasses to hide bruises. At others, she begged the media to see the man she once fell in love with, not the monster he was becoming. Then came the infamous high-speed chase. In 1988, high on drugs and believing intruders were after him, Brown stormed into an insurance seminar with a shotgun and threatened the attendees. He then led police on a wild car chase across 2 states. The man who once danced with unshakable rhythm was now weaving erratically down highways, chased not by beats, but by sirens. He was arrested, sentenced to 6 years, and served over 2. When he emerged, the world had changed. Music had changed. His place in it had disappeared. But life wasn't done punishing him. Adrienne died suddenly in 1996 from complications during cosmetic surgery. The woman who had endured his rage was gone, and with her went a piece of the man himself. Brown grew more reclusive, more suspicious. His inner circle became a revolving door of opportunists, lawyers, distant relatives, all with open hands and empty hearts. In his final years, Brown was ravaged by illness, diabetes, prostate cancer, heart failure, and worst of all, pneumonia, the disease that finally silenced him on Christmas Day 2006 at the age of 73. The man who once howled into microphones with fire and fury died in a quiet hospital room, whispering only 2 words to his friend: "I'm going away tonight." But even in death, peace did not come. His will was immediately contested. Dozens of people, estranged children, business partners, alleged heirs, descended like vultures, tearing his legacy apart in courtrooms for over a decade. DNA tests revealed more children than he ever claimed. His estate, once estimated at over $100 million, became the center of one of the most complicated and bitter inheritance battles in music history. James Brown had tried to control everything. In the end, he could control nothing. Not his legacy, not his name, not even his final resting place. His body wasn't buried for over 2 months. And yet, even as the man collapsed, the myth remained.
James Brown died a fractured man, his body worn, his voice gone, his empire splintered. But what he left behind was something few artists, or even kings, could claim: a revolution dressed as rhythm. He didn't just influence music, he detonated it. Every beat of funk, every whisper of hip-hop, every horn section screaming through a pop track, it all carries the fingerprints of James Brown. Without him, there is no Michael Jackson, no Prince, no Bruno Mars. There is no hip-hop as we know it. His voice has been sampled in over 1,000 songs, his rhythms dissected, imitated, worshipped. And yet, his legacy wasn't just sonic, it was spiritual. He was the first Black artist to own himself in a world that wanted to own him. At a time when many were told to sit down and sing pretty, James Brown stood up and screamed into the microphone, "Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud." It was more than a lyric. It was a demand for recognition, a challenge to a nation, a crown for a people long denied one. He told kids to stay in school. He bought radio stations to amplify Black voices. He calmed cities on the edge of riots with his music. And when his name was dragged through courtrooms and tabloids, many still clung to the truth that, flawed or not, this man had changed them. His net worth may have crumbled under lawsuits and bad blood, but his cultural wealth is immeasurable. His capes, his screams, his sweat-soaked performances, they weren't just entertainment. They were survival. A poor boy, abandoned in the South, had stared down a world built to crush him and made it dance instead. In 2020, after years of legal chaos, his estate finally reached a settlement. Proceeds from his catalog were set to fund educational scholarships for disadvantaged youth, a last poetic twist. The man who left school in 8th grade, now helping others rise through education. There is no statue tall enough, no theater loud enough to contain James Brown. But there is an image that still lives in the memory of the world. A man in a red cape, collapsing to his knees, tears in his eyes, sweat on his brow, only to rise again. Always rising. Because that's what James Brown taught us.
He wasn't perfect, he wasn't clean, but James Brown was real. He screamed, he stumbled, he soared, and in doing so, he gave the world not just music, but motion. He made us move, he made us feel. He made us believe that no matter where we came from, no matter how deep the pain, the rhythm could carry us forward. For a generation of Black Americans, he wasn't just the Godfather of Soul. He was the sound of pride echoing through living rooms, protests, and dance floors. He was the fire beneath the silence. And for millions around the world, he was proof that even the most broken man could shake the earth with nothing but a microphone and a heartbeat. So now, it's your turn to remember him. Not just the mugshots, not just the capes, but the story, the full story of a man who lived too loudly, loved too wildly, and left too early. If James Brown was part of your life, if you danced to his records, found strength in his voice, or felt seen through his message, share it, speak it, pass it on. Because legacies aren't built in studios or courts, they're built in memory. And memory only lives if we keep telling the story. If this tribute moved you, subscribe for more untold stories of legends behind the spotlight. Leave a comment, share your favorite James Brown song. Let's keep the rhythm alive, together. Because as long as someone somewhere still says, "Get up off of that thing," James Brown will never truly be gone.